But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is a star, and it looks like the actress from Homeland. On this Valentine's date night episode of Moving Panels, we discuss Stardust. Welcome to this Valentine's episode of Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramy Wells, and joining me today in the co-host chair, she is the one that truly has my heart. It is my Valentine forever, my wife, Bethany Wells.
Aw, hi. You're the star. You're the twinkle in my eye. Is that anything?
That works. It
Sure.
works. Why not? We talk about stars with Stardust. So as we talked about last week on the One Shot, we decided that this year for our Valentine date night episode, we would discuss the Neil Gaiman adaptation directed by Matt Vaughn of Stardust. So let's go ahead and jump into it, give a little bit of the background. So the movie was released August 10th of 2007. I don't think we talked about this last week. Now I did talk about this was the first time you saw it.
Yes, I had never seen the movie before. I'd heard of it. I'd heard a lot of people say that it was really good and underrated, but I had never personally watched it.
Yeah, and I didn't see it in theaters. I didn't see it until it came out. I think I was still working at Blockbuster at the time.
Yeah, that tracks.
And I think I got it when we got it in at Blockbuster, and I enjoyed it. I was a big fan of it. Just to go ahead and expose that. But it was directed by Matthew Vaughn, who is not a unknown director when it comes to comic book adaptations. He is also the director of Kick-Ass. He's done all of the Kingsman franchise.
Oh, fun.
And he also did X-Men First Class.
Oh, well,
yeah. So, I mean, there's some good ones there. But the comic book, and we talked about this a little bit last week.
Yeah.
It was a comic. So it was released as 4 issues.
It was like serialized.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's exactly the same. It's broken into the different chapters. Mm-hmm. They just divided it up into 4 issues, and it was released in 1997 underneath the Vertigo label that DC, their Vertigo imprint, just because that's what DC released kind of, I guess you'd say more adult type things, because this really is more of a quote unquote adult fairy tale.
It reads very much like, I was going to say, kind of like the traditional fairy tale. It's a little grotesque, but also has some dark themes, but also just that whimsy and that fantastical thing that jars right up next to it.
Yeah, which is, it's Neil Gaiman.
That is very Neil Gaiman.
Yeah. So Neil Gaiman
has a type.
Yeah, Neil Gaiman did write this. Of course, many comic book fans know him as the writer of The Sandman. He did American Gods. He did Good Omens.
Yeah.
We found out that he did Coraline.
Right.
And then it was the artwork was by Charles Vess, who had worked with Neil Gaiman before with Sandman. He drew 3 issues of Sandman.
The art is so beautiful, and it really does remind you of the classic fairy tale books. Just the style of it. It's like soft, but the evil and wicked things are very grotesque. And yes, it's very good.
He contributed 175 illustrations.
Just for this book?
Just for Stardust.
Wow.
Yeah. And again, because it's not divided up into panels, it really reads kind of like Bethany is saying, like a classic fairy tale book. There's some pages that are just a splash of an illustration. There's some pages with no illustration. And then there's some pages where the illustration kind of is along the edges of the book or smack in the middle, and the words are above and below and all that. It's not broken into panels like a traditional comic book. So this really is a graphic novel.
Right.
It was released in 1998 as a single book, which they titled Neil Gaiman and Charles Vess's Stardust. And then there was a subtitle, Being a Romance Within the Realms of Fairy. So again, following that I guess fairy, epic fairy tale. So it was Stardust, being a romance within the realms of fairy.
Right. It almost reminds you a little bit of Princess Bride, where
Oh, yeah. I've got that several times in my notes.
It's just a little bit like we are trying to make this seem older than it actually is.
Yeah. Oh, no. He was definitely going pre-Tolkien.
Yeah.
With the way he was writing this. And then, of course, the movie is coming right off the heels of, Return of the King.
Right.
And so it's trying to capitalize on post-Tolkien a little bit.
Right.
But that was in 98. Then in 99, Neil Gaiman decided to do something that I thought was a little strange. He released it as a novel without illustrations.
Huh. Okay.
What do you think that does to the experience of this story if you read it without the illustrations?
I feel like you could still get a lot out of it, but I don't think it would be quite as... I don't know. I don't think it would have that same fairy tale type feel.
It wouldn't be as immersive.
Right.
I also think that Vess really creates a world within his drawings that Gaiman doesn't necessarily allow you to picture with his words.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of places in the novel where you get more of who the character is or what the setting looks like or what the events are occurring through Vess's illustrations more so than you get through Gaiman's description.
I could see that. Yeah, definitely. Because, like, the furry man, they don't really give him a name.
Yeah.
But I think he would be, especially because he is such a vague character, he really comes to life in the book. Granted, they don't put him in the movie. But he comes to life in the book because you can see him. He becomes this lovable character, whereas I don't know if you would have that same attachment to him if you couldn't see what he looked like, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and I almost want to say it's the same when Tristram, which we'll get into that in a minute, when he travels with the first time with the black candle, because there's the illustration showing what's happening.
Right.
And I think the illustration really
ties the words into what is
and I think
on.
It helps a lot more than just he takes a step and then he's here, and he takes a step and then he's here, and I think the visuals help with that a little bit more. But of course, they did decide to turn this into a movie. Gaiman was hesitant to have it made into a film, and that was mainly because he, of course, as many of the British writers around this time were big fans of Alan Moore, and he was disappointed by the Alan Moore adaptations, as we have discussed in this on this show before, as Alan Moore has been as well. But he was hesitant, but he did agree to it as long as I didn't quite find out exactly how he worked the contract, but he did stay on as kind of like a consultant.
Right.
I did find that he did tell Matthew Vaughn, this is your movie.
I also, just the impression I've gotten from the things that I've read and the other adaptations I've seen of his, he doesn't feel like his stuff is quite as precious as Alan Moore does. Like, I get the impression that Alan Moore thinks any sort of variation from his story is a travesty, whereas Neil Gaiman is more open to interpretations and understanding.
Yeah, and we'll get into more of that with the moving panels, but let's go ahead and get into the characters. I'm just going to run through them really quick, and then we can focus on whoever we want to talk about. So first off, we have our main character, Tristan Thorne. If you're following the movie, in the comic, it is Tristran.
Although I did not pick up on that until you said, Bethany, that says Tristran.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, it doesn't. It says Tristan.
So yeah, Tristran with an extra R in it in the comic. Played by Charlie Cox. Years before we would all know him as Daredevil. Here he was, a young Charlie Cox. Then we've got the star, who is named Yvain, played by Claire Danes. Lamia, I don't remember how they pronounced Michelle Pfeiffer's character's name.
Oh, I don't know if they really
ever
pronounce
in the movie?
say her name. They don't say her name much in the book
No,
either.
well, she doesn't have a name in the book.
Okay.
She is only referred to as the Witch Queen in the book. The names of her and her sisters were created for the movie.
Okay. I don't remember how they pronounced it in the movie because
I'm wanting to say
I don't think they say it very often.
Yeah, the witch that has the little selling cart. I want to say she says it, and but I can't remember how they pronounced it. But then we've got Mark Strong playing Septimus, also not unknown to comic book fans. He was Sinestro in the horrible Green Lantern movie, Dr. Sivana in Shazam, and he's Merlin in the Kingsman movies.
All right, so, there you go.
Then we got Captain Shakespeare, played by Robert De Niro. We got Primus, played by Jason Fleming, who had, speaking of Alan Moore, had appeared in From Hell and The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and then would continue working with Matthew Vaughn in both Kick-Ass and X-Men First Class. Not only that, but also, I think, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Like, this guy is one of those British actors that you just go, I've seen him and stuff.
Right.
Then we got Secundus. Is that how you're supposed to pronounce it? Secundus. Played by Rupert Everett, where you think that he's going to be a bigger role because of the way he's introduced.
And then it is immediately killed.
And then he's killed, yes. Then we've got Ferdy the Fence, made-up character played by Ricky Gervais. We've got the character of Victoria Forrest, played by Sienna Miller. The King of Stormhold, I had to mention, even though he dies at the beginning of the movie as well, played by the great Peter O'Toole, also no stranger to comic books as he appeared in Supergirl back in the 80s. The narrator was Magneto himself, Ian McClellan. Then we've got a young Dustin Thorne, which is Tristan's dad, played by Ben Barnes, who also would later go on to play Jigsaw on the Punisher television show. So all these people,
they go on to
do other comic book stuff. And speaking of all of that, we've got Humphrey, character created for the movie. That if you do a double take, you'll realize you are looking at a very blonde with a mustache Superman, Henry Cavill,
with a very Lex Luthor attitude.
Yeah. So we can focus on some of these. So I'll go ahead and ask the question. So who do you want to see again? And who do you wish would become a ghost that would follow us around until the end of the story?
So I know we didn't touch on this, but the character that I mentioned earlier, I wish had been included in the movie and wasn't, was this, he's like this furry man. He's like he's half man, but he's also some sort of animal. Yeah. But he, Tristan, whatever, his dad meets him at the beginning of the book, and he's just kind of kind to him. He lets him stay in the barn without kicking him out. And then later, Tristan meets him not long after he goes into Fairy, and he helps him, takes care of him. And he's just a very kind character, kind of helps build the world of Fairy in a way, and, you know, kind of explains the lore and explains the rules of being there to help establish the reader so that they know, you know, what the rest of the book is going to be like, what his journey is going to look like. He gives him the black candle, and I was sad that character was not included.
Yeah. But of the ones that were, like, who do you want to see? Who do you want more of? Like, who would you want to see either in a sequel or a prequel or? Because I can tell you mine would be Captain Shakespeare. Like, I would like to see a little bit more of that. I know it was a made-up character. It was... there is
a
parallel character. Yeah, there's a Captain Albric in the book. But the whole ship part is only 3.5 pages.
Right.
Whereas in this, they make it a good... In fact, there's an undetermined amount of time that they spend on this ship.
Right.
Which is funny because I'm pretty sure the movie is only supposed to take place over the course of a week.
Right.
but yet it feels like they are on this ship for
months.
Yeah, for a good long while. And this is where we also get our, heroic kind of montage of Tristan not only getting more confidence in himself, but also this is where we develop the relationship between he and Yvain. But that would be it for me. I think the character that I could do without, honestly, is Humphrey. I get that they wanted to do kind of a love triangle-esque type thing.
Yeah.
But, and we'll get into more of this with the moving panel section, but the matching character in the book of Mr. Monday is just a more interesting story. And like I said, we'll get into that. The ending, we'll get into that more in the moving panel section.
Right.
But I think that's what it would be for me.
I think the character I could do without in the movie is like you said, any character that they added. Because they already, so I'm going to pick Ricky Gervais's character, the Ferdy the Fence. I kind of get the point of his character, but also I feel like there could have been other ways to get the point across that he gave, if that makes any sense. Like, I think it was just an excuse to get Ricky Gervais into the movie.
Yeah.
And
well, it almost was again, we'll probably do this a lot, compare it to Princess Bride. Ricky Gervais was almost like the Billy Crystal part, not anywhere in comparison, but that would be my best connection. It's just this one little part that they need in order to continue the story,
to move the plot forward. But I don't know. It already kind of felt like the movie was watching the Cliff's Notes version of the movie. It was very like dot, 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 dot. Here's the plot. Here's the scene. Here's the scene. And I missed a lot of the like romance of the story and the flow. It felt like there wasn't enough room to breathe between each action moment, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So I would say any character that was added for just the sake of either putting a recognizable face into the movie, I would get them out of there. If you had to have Ricky Gervais in it, make him the gnome creature guy that he needs.
Which honestly, based off of Vess's artwork, it almost looked like they kind of mimicked his, at least, wardrobe.
Yeah.
Off of him a little bit. I don't know. But I did want to point out this little bit of trivia. So, Yvain, the part was actually offered to Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Huh.
However, she turned it down because this was at the time where she wanted to work with Freddie Prinze.
Right.
So
they were pretty freshly married.
She didn't want to be away from him. And of course they did this filming over in Europe. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Very cute.
Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and listen to an 80s Flick Flashback podcast once in a while, you could miss it. Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes, VCRs, and the video rental stores? Does the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? My name is Tim Williams. I'm the creator and host of the 80s Flick Flashback podcast. On each episode, I'm joined by guest co-hosts to discuss one of the many movies released in the 1980s. We share our first-time watch memories, our favorite scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories about the cast and crew along the way. New episodes are released every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an excellent episode of the 80s Flick Flashback podcast. The ad is over. Go home. Go.
What's up, dudes? I'm Jerry D of Totally Rad Christmas, the podcast that talks all things Christmas in the 80s. Toys, movies, specials, music, books, fashion, and fads.
If it was gnarly during Christmas in the 80s, he's got it covered. Wait, is there a lot of things to talk about for the 80s and Christmas?
Well, you got the movie giants like Christmas Vacation, Scrooged, and A Christmas Story. There are TV specials like Muppet Family Christmas, Claymation Christmas Celebration, and a Garfield Christmas special.
Plus classics shown every year.
You also jam out to Last Christmas, Do They Know It's Christmas, and Christmas in Hollis. But most of all, it was a time for the most bodacious, best-selling Christmas toys ever, like He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers,
And Cabbage Patch Kids.
yes, them too. We cover them all, plus much more, including standard segments like Hap Hap Happiest Memory, Gag Me with the Spoon, The Other Half of the Battle,
And Chant with the Littles.
So tune in to Totally Rad Christmas everywhere you get your podcasts. Turn the clock back and dive into those warm and fuzzy memories.
Later, dudes.
All right, let's get into the moving panel section. So as we talked about earlier, this comic book is more of a adult fantasy, an adult fairy tale, just a little bit more grown up,
Right.
a little darker. I will say the couple of, we'll just call them love scenes that are in the comic,
Right.
just seem to be a little bit,
Gratuitous.
yeah.
You know how I like to read romance novels, so that didn't bother me quite as much. I enjoyed it. I like that kind of thing.
Yeah. So this is where, again, I found the quote where Gaiman gave his blessing to kind of lighten up the story. He told Vaughn, "Stardust is yours." And then when Vaughn offered him a script to read, like, here's a script that I wrote, I want you to read it. Gaiman actually said he did not want to read the script. He told Vaughn, "I wrote the novel, but this is your film, your vision, but I will help you." So I kind of like that he had enough faith in Matthew Vaughn to hand over the reins, but say, "Hey, look, I will give you this. It is yours, but if you need advice, I will provide you with advice."
Yeah.
And that's what they did. We do have a few changes, which is probably a little bit of our conversation here. First off, the fantasy world. In the movie, it is the whole entire fantasy world is called Stormhold, whereas in the comic book, it was called Fairy.
Right.
And I will say, I don't know if this was intentional. I think Fairy, I like that it actually had a name, like Stormhold.
Right.
I think Fairy makes it a little bit too vague. But at the same time, I also noticed, and you can speak on this if you disagree, that Fairy in the comic felt a lot more magical. Whereas Stormhold, although there are magical elements, feels a little bit more reality based.
I will definitely agree with you on that. I liked the more vague idea of fairy just because it kind of seemed like you stepped through the wall.
The hole in the wall.
Yeah, you step through the hole in the wall and you don't just go to a different section of the same place. You're stepping into an entirely new world.
Yeah.
And it becomes like outside the bounds of what we understand reality to be. And I liked the vagueness. I liked the vastness of it. Whereas, I don't know. And it seems like giving it all one name makes it a bit more finite. Whereas it being vaguely fairy seemed it's a bit more infinite.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but the problem with that, though, is that in the book, it wasn't as mysterious because every 9 years they would have the market, the festival, whatever it was, and they set up, you could see it from wall.
Right.
Like you could see them setting up the market and it would be all of a sudden this, whereas in the movie, wherever this market was, felt like a location.
Right.
Like this is just a town.
But see, I liked that part of the book as well, is that it kind of plays to that idea of this is where our mythology and this is where our ideas of the beyond come from, is the glimpses we see through the wall.
Yeah.
And occasionally we can pass through and experience it. But it's like going on vacation. You know, you can go for a little bit, but you can't stay forever.
Yeah, which is the other thing. So in the book, every 9 years when they have that festival, people from Wall are free to just cross.
Go in and out.
Yeah, crosses as they want. There are guards throughout the rest of the time that prevent people, but in the movie they make it seem like no one should ever cross.
Right.
Kind of felt like M. Night Shyamalan's The Village.
Right.
We don't know what's out there, and
Yeah.
so I don't know. It's a little mix of both. I can see it both ways. I like that it's a little bit more, kind of like the world of Oz.
Right.
It's a different world. I mean, in the book, you've got him going to a forest in which the trees are alive, and
Yeah.
of course,
And trying to kill him.
yeah, I was about to say, very similar to Wizard of Oz again.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to go ahead and show my hand, and I do think it's because I read the book first, and it could be because you saw the movie first. Your preferences lie there, whereas me reading the book first, I preferred the story that was played out there as opposed to the movie. However, I didn't dislike the movie. So that's why I'm going to say I do prefer the mythology and the world building that the book offered over not bad mythology and world building, but still not as good, in my opinion, as the book.
So what were your thoughts? We're going to get into some characters that were different, that were missing as well.
Okay.
I know you've already mentioned about the little hairy man. What were your thoughts on Tristan's mother, Una? Because in the book, she is described as really a magical creature.
Right.
She's got like these hairy, elfish
Yeah.
ears.
You get the impression she's an elvish.
Which Tristan also has.
Yeah, on
one ear is slightly,
hairy or pointed or both.
So what do you think about them taking kind of that aspect out and making her just more human?
See, I think it this was another thing in the book, is that Tristan just knew where things were. Like, he stepped into the world and he
had this magical
this ability,
compass ability. Yeah.
He just knew things about it. And I feel like that played a really big part in obviously moving the story forward. But it also kind of built this idea of he isn't human, he is other, which he was when he was in Wall as well. He was this outcast.
Yeah.
He's human, but he's not quite what everyone else is. He's different. He's outside. Not different enough for people to point fingers at him about something specific, but just enough for him to be other. And I feel like his mother being something other than human helps build that character of when he is in Wall, he is not of those people. And then when he comes to Fairy, he truly becomes the person he's supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was going to ask you about that ability that he has, which they don't explain why he has it, if I remember right.
No, he just has it.
Yeah. But pretty much like, how is he going to find the star? This is little hairy man again talking to him. It's like, so where's, what direction is this? And he knows exactly what direction it is with all confidence.
And like the distance and how long it'll take to get there. And
which then plays into the black candle. So in the movie, the black candle comes from his mom.
Yeah.
Who gives it to his dad, and then the dad gives it to him. And it's just to think of where you want to go, and poof, you're going to be there. In the novel, it's more of you light it, and as long as it's lit, with every step you take, you go X number of miles or whatever.
Kilometers, probably, since it's British.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Which I will say, I think I would have liked to have seen that visually in a movie. I think that would have been cool. Just he steps and
is in the clouds. He steps and he's, wherever.
Yeah, because I think that took away from when they use it the second time and he throws his hand into the fire.
Oh, yeah.
And then it burns out while they're in mid-flight and they end up on the cloud. I mean, it made sense for the movie, but once you read it in the book and you realize how they travel, I think it works.
It's a more interesting, and
he makes that step. They're on the cloud, and he can't make another step
because the
candle is burned out. So I kind of like that. Going back to talking about mom and all of that, what do you think about the way that they adapted the whole mom and father story? Because in the movie, you've got the opening, which shows the dad and him having the
affair with her,
the fling, with who would be his mom. But then they leave the dad single,
right?
And then at the end, you see the dad reuniting with Una, although there's no development to that at all.
No.
You just see the dad with the mom again at the end. Whereas in the novel, Dunstan, who is the dad, actually marries.
Yes, this girl that he was kind of dating before he met the mom.
And they're married when Tristan arrives.
Yeah.
So, but she decides to be
his mother.
So he has grown up thinking this woman was his mother the entire time. And then they have a daughter, so he has a sister. So what do you think of that? Because just to finish this, in the novel at the end, once Tristan
releases the mom is released from her curse.
Yes, but once Tristan goes back to Wall and kind of says his goodbye,
right?
That's it.
Right.
Like, we don't see the dad, the mom, and the sister are
out
done.
of his life forever.
Yeah.
Right.
They are done.
I see the benefits of both. I feel like in a movie, you're going to want more of that just like happy ending for everybody. People are going to be like, oh, but the dad. And it is kind of skeevy that he had the relationship with the mom when he was clearly about to be married to the other woman. But in a book, it's almost a little bit easier to gloss over and forgive and move forward. Whereas in a movie, I feel like it would be harder because you literally just watched it happen. Then, however, I feel like, I don't know. I liked the book's ending. I liked that the mom ended up going from being this slave for years and years and years. And then she finally gets to break free and she gets to be queen of this kingdom that, has been slowly killing off the sons throughout the course of the book.
Yeah. So let's start talking about the ending, and we'll talk about the mom's ending first. So in the book, the magical chain that is holding her starts to fade because it is held until the moon loses a daughter.
Yes, the moon loses its daughter, and what's the other part of it?
Yeah, there's something like that. And
the first time you hear it, you're like, well, that's nonsense. None of that makes any sense. And then as she says it at the end, you're like, oh.
But because the star has fallen, the moon has lost a daughter. And so the chain is slowly like getting smaller until it eventually just disappears. Whereas in the movie, it is more of a she is released.
Right.
So, and then we've got the actual ending. Now this is where I think you and I are going to differ. And you said it earlier, I am probably going to be more on the side of the movie. I think that Gaiman, you talked about this, but I think Gaiman just wrapped up each story just a little too easily, quickly, and just, okay, now this is done, move on. Now this is done, move on. Now this is done, move on. Because you've got like the Witch Queen, where, she's been after them. And in the novel, it's just, she's used so much power, she's too old, and she goes, yeah, I'm too old to do this, to continue doing this.
But then by the time she finds Yvain no longer has her heart.
Yeah, but still, she still says, I'm too, I'm too old. Like, it's now my time. I'm just going to wither and die, and just kind of goes away. Yeah. And then, like I said, the mom it's the same thing. She gets free because of the technicality in
the prophecy was fulfilled.
The prophecy, yeah. And there's and let's even talk about the princes. I mean, Primus is killed by a snake.
Right.
Like several pages into the book before we even get to the ending.
Right.
There is no Primus helping Tristan defeat the Witch Queen.
No.
There is none of that. Like, they're all dead.
No, Septimus gets killed by the snake.
No, Septimus
gets killed by...
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Witch. Primus gets killed by the witch in the, inn at the very beginning.
No, I got them all. I got them flipped. Primus is the one that's killed at the end. Yeah. Which is different, too. He's not naked in the tub. He's killed just...
he's killed pretty heroically. He's killed, protecting
He's
Tristan
going to protect the star.
And the star.
Yeah.
And then...
I confused the two brothers. And then Septimus is killed by a snake.
Yeah, but it's a bit more dramatic. The witch is in charge of him dying.
She is, but there's no climactic purpose to it.
I will say it is... The story's resolution in the book is a little less climactic. The story is clearly the book is a romance, and that is the main focus. And there are all of these different hurdles along the way, but the primary goal of this book is to tell a love story between Yvain and Tristan, in my opinion. Yeah. And that is the climax, is them finally coming together. You think, Yvain's going to think that he is gone, and she is...
Yeah, let's talk about the Victoria part. So, in the movie, he's head over heels for Victoria, Sienna Miller's character. She, I think more so in the movie, kind of plays him a little bit.
Yeah.
More so than in the novel. And then when he returns, it's more of a
she's like, okay, well, I did make that promise. I guess I'm gonna marry you if that's what you want. And that's when he realizes it's not what he wants.
Yeah, but but I think what I'm thinking of is in the movie, it's more of he just goes, yeah, you're a horrible person. Whereas in the graphic novel, she can't believe he actually went and did it.
Yeah, she thinks he was being stupid, and she was just like,
she
fine,
just thought he was being silly.
You go get a star, I'll marry you. And then he really does it, and she freaks out.
And you end up finding out
she was already engaged.
Well, she eventually becomes engaged. I don't know if she was or
she was promised to be engaged to the other guy.
But that is when he returns. She apologizes to him, says that she has felt bad ever since he disappeared. Yeah. And of course, in the book, we don't know how much time.
You get the impression it's been a long time.
Yeah, that it's been months, if not a year or two. Yeah. We know more time after the events happen, but he sits down with Victoria, and Victoria says all of this, and Victoria explains everything, and
she says, "But I am a person of my
word." Yeah, so I will. And he said, "You know what? You never promised me you would marry me. You promised me the thing I wanted the most,
and the thing I want the most
is for you to be happy." And for you to marry Mr. Monday. Which
I
also
was very precious.
Which there was also another kind of prophecy type thing about 2 Mondays.
Oh, yeah. When Monday gets married on a Friday or something like that.
Yeah. So there was part of that too. But I will say in the movie, I don't like that he gets up to do this in the movie. This is after he and the star have actually had their relationship,
yes,
come to fulfillment. And then he just gets up and leaves her. Doesn't leave a message, doesn't leave a note.
Look, if you're going to leave in the middle of the night, just be like, hey, honey.
Yeah.
I've got a quick errand to run. I will be back. Stay here.
Yeah. Now, of course, it does lead to a very climactic part where she decides she's just going to go over to Wall, and then he discovers that if she does
into Wall, she will become a piece of rock.
Yeah. And so there's the whole climactic part of will he make it to her before she crosses over, which they don't really do that in the novel. So, I mean, it made for that little moment, but I still think, like, you're talking about making this a love story, making this romantic. That was the jerkiest thing he does.
It really wasn't my favorite part. But what I was saying, like, in the movie, you have to have that big climactic scene with the witches. And you have to have that big, huge fight scene and all of the gross out humor and all of that stuff and all the weird things that she does make Septimus do.
Yeah, she kills Septimus and then brings his animated corpse back to life.
Right. And I get it. I get for a movie, like, visually, you need more of that. Whereas in a book, I feel like it's a bit more acceptable to just have it be something where, like, no, it's the morals of the story that are going to triumph over this, not who's going to punch the hardest.
Yeah. Yeah, well, but again, it's not even who's going to punch the hardest, because there's really not much of a fight at the end. There's just the big, it's a big standoff, and a couple of magic things happen, and they do kill the two sisters.
Right. And then although Michelle Pfeiffer's moment is very...
Well, and then they do have a moment similar to what happens in the book where she just gives up and says, I can't keep doing this.
She has nothing
She has nothing left because her sisters are dead. And so she just tells them they can go. But then as they go, she turns, and that's a nice little twist, which I think is good for people who are fans of the book.
Right.
That you put that, they're going to kind of end it the same, but no, there's a little twist there. And then it comes down to Claire Danes, the star, just shines really brightly and explodes Michelle Pfeiffer. So they do that. I put this in my notes, but I'm just going to ask you if you want to. Do you want to talk about the unicorn?
I would like to talk about the unicorn for just a little bit.
Go ahead.
And then we can talk about, like, the ending.
Yeah.
So the unicorn is in the movie, but not in the same way that it is in the book. The book, you were so excited when you read the book.
Yes, because when they introduced the unicorn, it's the Lion and the Unicorn, the old children's story, which I'm a big fan of Alice in Wonderland, and that's another kind of section of Alice in Wonderland is the Lion and the Unicorn, and that's how I originally knew of it. So for them to put it in here again, it made that fantasy connection again of this is a different world.
Right.
And possibly could be connected to Wonderland. Who's to say that Wonderland and Fairy...
Who's to say they aren't the same?
Yeah, aren't the same.
But yeah, so the Lion and the Unicorn are fighting. Tristan, because he knows the old story of the Lion and the Unicorn, he knows to give the crown to the Lion, and that spares the Unicorn. Well, the Unicorn is, like, on death's door. And when Yvain falls from the sky, she breaks her leg.
Yes.
And that's a huge thing throughout.
She has a limp for the entire rest of the book. I did like, though, that to avoid having to deal with that in the movie, they have that moment where when she's taking the bath, Michelle Pfeiffer
heals her leg.
Yeah. So that way they can go, okay, we can
we're
get
done,
rid of this little...
We're done with you limping everywhere. But yeah, so but that's like a hindrance. That's what's causing them to move so slowly. So then it turns out that unicorns are friends of the moon and the stars. So the unicorn pretty much chooses to protect Yvain.
Whereas in the movie, it's as if the moon sent the unicorn.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's because not only did she save her, but it's because, the unicorn is like friend, family, protector of the moon and the stars. And then they have this unicorn, and that helps them kind of keep moving along. And then the unicorn ends up...
The stuff at the end is almost exactly the same, where the unicorn protects Tristan from drinking the poison.
Yes.
And then protects them until it's...
killed.
Well, the thing is, in the movie, we don't actually know what happens to the unicorn. The unicorn is protecting them, and then there's the green flames that Michelle Pfeiffer's character is creating. And it just kind of engulfs, but we don't see anything that happens.
We see everything in the book.
In the book, it's not green flame. It is...
She decapitates it.
She cuts the unicorn's head off. She kills it.
And then...
stabs it in the eye first. That's what she does first. But it does give a... and even at the very end, when she's the old woman, I think the drawing Vess shows she still has the horn like on her belt or something.
Right. Well, she reanimates the corpse of the unicorn to... No, she doesn't. She doesn't reanimate it. She uses it to like do
like a spell or something.
Foresight.
Yeah.
To, predict the future. She cuts it open.
Yeah.
Reads the entrails.
Yeah, whereas the movie kind of only... I mean, they do the entrails at the very beginning with the sisters.
Right.
Where they cut open the animal. But other than that, we just see the stuff with the I don't know what you call them now, the little runes.
Yeah,
the prince,
rocks, yeah.
That Septimus and Primus both use.
Right.
So we get that. All right, let's get to the ending, kind of the epilogue, if you will.
Right.
So in the movie, when everything is done, we find out that Tristan is the last male heir of Stormhold, so he becomes king.
Right.
We get the moment where you can tell that the people of Wall and the people of Stormhold have finally united, and they are celebrating I assume it's supposed to be his coronation, where his mom kind of hands over everything to him. And he and Yvain are the king and the queen. They are gifted another black candle.
Right.
Then I'll make this go quick, but then it's explained
because the movie does too.
Yeah, they ruled for many years. Everything was great and wonderful,
life,
and
raised
then
children together.
And then they as they are both in their deathbeds, notebook style, they both...
Oh, yeah, this was sweet.
They use the black candle so that they can both go back up into the stars, and they would live... although their stars are very separate when they show the two twinkling stars. But they both go up to be stars, I guess, as their eternity. That's the happy, wonderful...
Tie
ending.
It up in a nice, sweet little bow.
Yes, which, like I said, the book does a lot of, except for this epilogue. So in the graphic novel, it's all revealed that he's the king. But instead of going to rule, he says...
The mother says, okay, it's time for you to be king now. And he says, I have only just started traveling.
Yeah.
I spent my entire life in one place. I've just gotten a taste of it. I'm not ready to settle down yet. So he sends the mom on to rule the kingdom in his place.
Yeah.
And he and Yvain travel the world and go on adventures for years.
I think it's 3 years is when they say.
Well, it's 3 years. They come back and then they change their mind and they go back.
Yeah. And then it's like another 2 or.
Yeah. Something like that. So then they finally come back and they rule for however many years.
But here's the difference. In the novel, Yvain does not age.
Yvain does not age, but Tristan does.
Yes. And they also, because she's a star, he's a human.
Cannot have children.
They cannot have children. And so he eventually grows old and dies, but she
lives forever.
And so I guess they don't worry about bloodline anymore. She is now the ruler of Stormhold forever.
Right.
And then they have what has to be the saddest ending.
Yeah.
Because whereas in the movie they keep talking about how she's trying to get back.
Well, in the book they make it very clear she cannot never go back.
So at the end of the book, they talk about her. She sleeps in the high tower that had been the ceiling
like
had been
tower.
Yeah, and the ceiling had caved in, and that's where she sleeps. And you find out so that's the closest she can be to her sisters.
Yeah.
And so she just spends time up there just staring at the stars, and that's how she lives her life alone forever.
Is it bad? Is it weird that I do prefer the book's ending to the movie?
I will say a little, yes.
I just, like I said, it felt like the movie made everything such a nice, tidy little bow. Everything got completely cleaned up, packaged in a nice little wrapping paper, tight little bow, and sent on its way. Whereas I liked the idea of this like open-ended forever. There's still more adventures that could come. This is not the only story. This is just part of their story.
Yeah.
And it's this open-ended. I liked that they got to live this happy, long life together. Even though it did mean that, you know, he died and she moved, she kept going forward and she had really no one left afterwards to be with. Although, who's to say she doesn't eventually meet someone else or other things could happen. There are other adventures. And I liked the idea that it wasn't a nice, tidy little bow. And that is the end of this part of the story.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, he definitely creates a world, like we talked about with Wonderland and Oz and all that, in which you could tell another story that happened in Fairy.
Right.
And maybe have things that intertwine with the characters from this. But let's go, before we get into our final decision, I actually had a question, because the two of us experienced this differently. Again, I knew the movie, was very familiar with the movie, then found out about the book and read the book. You, on the other hand, did it the other way. You read the book, then watched the movie. Which one do you think someone should experience first?
It depends on the kind of person you are. I think if you're a person like me, I definitely would read the book and then watch the movie, because I feel like the book, it paints a better picture. It tells a better story. The world is more fleshed out. The reason I always like to read the book before I watch a movie is I feel like when I watch a movie first, I'm spending the entire book going like, okay, but when is this going to happen?
Yeah.
Okay, but when is this going to happen? And if it doesn't, I don't read a book in a day. It takes me several days to read a book. So I don't want to spend several days going like, okay, but when are we going to get to this part? And I'm going to reserve that for the 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
If that's what we got to do, I'm going to reserve it for that time. I was the kind of person who I did not like the epilogue ending to Harry Potter. I felt like I didn't need to know what happened when Harry got older with his children and sending them off to Hogwarts. I felt like that was too neat of a bow, too much finality. I love the idea that there is life beyond the story. When the book ends, there's life. The story continues.
Yeah.
And it can continue in your brain. You can come back to those characters and think like, oh, I wonder what they would be doing in this situation. And your brain gets to, wander through that world and think of different lives that these characters that you loved live. However, I think if you are more of I just want a good story and I want it to have a happy ending, I think the movie is a great movie and it's a great story. It tells a good story. And that's what you should do.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't be against you experiencing the book first. I will say this, and Bethany and I talked about this while I was reading it. The book takes a minute for you to be able to get into it.
I will say that, yeah.
It's probably a good 4 or 5 chapters before you're like, okay, I am done with the backstory and the expedition.
It feels like 4 or 5 chapters, but it's really just the one chapter.
No, I'm pretty sure it's 2 or 3. I might be exaggerating some, but I'm not exaggerating much. But yeah, I will say and this is going to get into our final decision a little bit. They're really close to each other. This is a really good adaptation.
Right.
So you really can't go wrong with whichever one you want to decide. I will tell you that if you do decide to either read the book or watch the movie, know that the moment they end up on the floating ship, that is when the two completely separate from each other.
Right. I will agree with that.
There's a few things that come back and connect almost identically, but that is the pivot where the book and the movie become two completely different stories.
Right.
After that moment. But let's go ahead and get into our final decision: bag it, stack it, or trade it for this date night movie. And go ahead and feel free to say, is it a good date night movie as you are giving it its rating?
So I'm going to say that I'm not going to bag it, but I would stack it. It's something I would enjoy watching again. It was honestly, I was thinking like, oh, maybe I should watch it again before we record tonight just so I can have it fresh on my mind. And that wasn't a bad thought. Like sometimes we watch these movies and I'm just like, no, I'm never watching that again. But this I would want to enjoy again in the future. I think it's a good date movie. It's cute, it's fun, it's an adventure. It's a lovely story. I will say it is so precious to me once Yvain starts falling for Tristan because she's a star. She literally glows.
Yeah.
And it is so sweet, but also simultaneously just heartbreaking when she's clearly just like happy and falling in love and she's glowing. And then he'll say something about Victoria and you instantly see her light go out. And it's tragic and it's sweet. I would also highly recommend the book if that's kind of your thing. If you enjoy reading, it isn't a graphic. I mean, it is technically a graphic novel, but it is not the traditional graphic novel. Like you said, it's not panels. It's a novel that has pictures in it.
Yeah.
So I would also stack the novel.
Yeah. So for me, I actually did say bag it on this one. I think there's a little bit of bias in it. I just really like this movie. Mm-hmm. I think it's a forgotten film. I don't think enough people either saw it or remembered it. Vaughn had an idea for a sequel. He had planned out a sequel, but the movie didn't do well enough for the studio to agree for a sequel. But he also blames that on the marketing because, again, they're coming off of Lord of the Rings. So the marketing he felt like was promoting it as this big fantasy epic. And he was like, no, this is more like it's more like Princess Bride. Mm-hmm. You know, this is a love story.
Maybe not quite as silly, but
but with a whimsy, at least with some whimsy, especially when you come to Robert De Niro's character.
Yeah.
Which I did want to point out. So Neil Gaiman said when it came to the book versus the movie, Neil Gaiman said, I sort of felt like my grounding in comics was actually very useful because in my head, the movie is just an Earth 2 version of Stardust. It's a parallel Earth version, which has Robert De Niro and stuff. And I get people who come to the book from having loved the movie who are really disappointed at some of the stuff that isn't there that Matthew brought. So I like that idea is that because the movie adapts the story, I think, more successfully than most other things that I have covered on this show. Because we're talking about a single story. This isn't adapting, years and years of comics. This is a single story. And I think of all the ones we've covered, from the Alan Moore storylines that we've done to some of the other individual stories that we have covered, I think this is the one that it adapted it the best. And like Bethany has said, and then Matthew Vaughn, along with Jane Goldman, who wrote this, and Jane Goldman, who I didn't mention earlier, was a writer that was actually brought on by Neil Gaiman. He introduced her to Matthew Vaughn. The two of them adapt this story so that it does work as a movie. Right. It does appeal to the viewers that are going to watch it because a lot of that ending that we've talked about from the book would not work in a movie.
No. And I'm not a person who has to have everything exactly like the book, no matter how much I love it. I understand that certain things in books do not work in movie form. So I do agree that stuff that had to be added, or the movie would not have been good.
Yeah. But I'm gonna say a bag it for both the book and the movie. Like I said, the book you gotta get a few chapters in before it really gets going. But it picks up, it hooks you. It's an immersive story. And again, I think it's not The Princess Bride, but I think it holds kind of that same weight as kind of a modern
Fairy
Princess
tale,
Bride.
yeah.
Modern fairy tale that you have there. And I think it's a good date movie. I think, and we talked about last week, of all the other ones we've covered, I think this is really the one that you would want to revisit.
I agree. It's super cute. It's cozy. It's a fun, like, if you're just wanting a quiet night on the couch and snuggle up and watch it. It's sweet. It's fun. It's interesting. I liked it.
Yeah. All right. So there you have it. There is our 4th annual Valentine's Day date night. Valentine's Day is a few days away from this episode dropping. So, hey, maybe this is an idea. Go out and see if you can find Stardust and sit, like Bethany just said, sit and snuggle up, and this will give you a nice movie to watch. But we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. Thank you, Bethany, for joining, and thank you so much for everything you do. And again, you do truly have my heart. You are my star. So thank you for that, and happy Valentine's Day to you.
Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you for having me.
All right, thanks everybody for listening. For today, from Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page. What soft, what light through yonder window breaks. Ooh, I said that badly.
Yonder. Tennessee Williams meets Shakespeare.